So here's the situation. You're an executive in your company, and your company wants to create a new supply chain initiative to slim down and really work with your supply chain well enough so that you can both know all the information, have others input that information so that it's readily available to you, and also to try to squeeze out as much of the expense that you can out of your supply chain. You want to implement a blockchain in order to do this. Here's how. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is 3 different areas. These 3 areas are governance, economics, and technology, that all 3 exist in a blockchain. First off, when we talk about governance in a blockchain, we talk about the decision making within the chain itself. Participants in the blockchain should be allowed to make decisions on the execution of the blockchain without a central authority weighing in on them. In other words, you don't want to get into the Trojan horse sort of situation where you're joining a blockchain and one central authority is constantly making all the decisions, making sure it's best for them and not necessarily best for you or maybe a dozen other participants that are in the room. The next thing is that participation should be universal. Everybody that participates should run a full node. Now, that would be for permissioned blockchains. So, for example, if your supply chain is only affecting certain types of business such as aerospace or the food industry or auto parts, then you would only want people who are in the auto parts industry or our aerospace industry to participate in the blockchain. They would have accounts that would give them access to certain parts of the data, depending on whether they're a machine shop or a wholesale supplier or any type of other function within the blockchain. Each of them would still run a full node, but they'd have different permissions based on how they are able to view the data and what kind of data they're putting into the system. They might require different forms, different reports, different functionality than other participants in the network. There's also non-permissioned blockchains that serve many different companies very well. And if that's the case, you could have a non-permissioned blockchain. What's important here is in the distributed model is that everybody runs a full node and everybody has the correct infrastructure in order to do so. So who's going to own this blockchain? Everybody that participates in the blockchain itself should own it, should own a piece of it. Okay, no one member of the consortium or group of people using it should have a majority stake in the blockchain. They shouldn't have more than half the say. They shouldn't have more than half the responsibility for updating it. They shouldn't also have more than half of the liability or burden should something go sideways or something go wrong. So everything needs to be shared equitably within the blockchain according to the blockchain rules. Usually those are written into smart contracts. So that's the picture of the governance model that needs to exist if you're making a decision to join or go with a blockchain or to create a blockchain with a consortium of companies that you've pulled together. The next thing is the economics of a blockchain. The blockchain should have a budget. The budget should be within the blockchain and managed by the smart contracts within the blockchain. So the financing is such that no single entity has financed more than 50% of it. No single entity is responsible for the total liquidity of the blockchain. There needs to be a sound economic plan to sustain the platform as it's being developed and as it's being rolled out and deployed. Then some blockchains have rewards. Some blockchains use the blockchain model of tokens to make sure that the developers get paid for how much they're developing, that those who maintain nodes get paid for the amount of computing power that they have, so that the blockchain then sustains itself as an entity, whether people continuously put money into to buy tokens and make them available in the blockchain on certain intervals. Those tokens need to be distributed equitably so that contributions could then be made equitably along the way. So let's talk about the technology. In order for a good distributed model, the technology also needs to be distributed. In other words, the architecture that the blockchain relies on, which is basically the consensus algorithm that says one node, one vote, to authenticate participants and authenticate transactions should be in place. You shouldn't be buying yourself into a model where one particular node has more buying power, more voting power, just because they operate 100 nodes and you're only going to be operating one. No one entity should have any more than one vote participating in the blockchain. Next thing is the development process shouldn't be controlled in a centralized way. The development should be a vote among its participants, and it should be, usually it's open source, and usually the developers donate their time to it, or the companies have their developers to put the time in if it's a business blockchain. And then the tokens recognize the hours put in for that development. And then, of course, the network governance. No single organization can have a majority control over all the nodes in the blockchain. So you really want to be careful that the companies aren't set up such that them and their subsidiaries or their partner companies have the majority of all the nodes and you're just kind of tagging along for the ride. You definitely don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you have an active role in the participation of the governance network so that you can be able to participate and get its benefits just as everyone else in the blockchain would. So there's basically 8 points. 8 points that you need to consider, and they're in the areas of governance, economics, and technology, to make sure that when you join a blockchain consortium and join and actually start functioning within the blockchain, that it is well distributed among all the nodes and that you are gaining the benefit that you expected when you first joined. So if you liked what you heard here, hit that like button and hit the subscribe button so we can get this out to more people. And hopefully we'll see you again later. Thanks.